everybody. Welcome back to the Sacred Femme Alchemy Podcast. Another episode of the Sacred, the Shakti Soul Sessions. And it is raining hardcore right now. It's been raining all day. I'm in San Francisco and I'm just looking out my beautiful window where I have trees, looking out at the street. There's a lot of rain. I feel so cozy inside. It's warm. Candles are lit, all of that stuff. And so I just feel really good. I did not want to record. I've been in trainings all day. One about money, one about wealth. Definitely felt my brain feeling really fried. And then I had another social media programming type of workshop, and I will say the latter one, that was a waste of money. I will say that. I was like, okay, I spent money on this. This was just, you know what it is? It's like when you see people online, and I wonder if people think this about me. You can leave it in the comments or whatever you want. And I used to get this comment a lot of like, people don't know my energy because I was always have static content and it would just be photos, and like people just don't see the real you. I think in a world of Instagram where it's all about aesthetics and like, what did they call it? Like the wellness girly back in the day. Just everything just looked so Instagram. Everything just looked so monochrome, homogenous, everything the same. And then when you see someone like in the 3D of presenting, you're like, oh my gosh, you have such a different personality. So it's like the personality doesn't match what you think you see on Instagram. And so I've been trying really more to just, I love doing audios. I love doing videos. I love doing that stuff. So hopefully you get a taste of what you see, of what it's like to actually work with me. Whether you attend any of my classes, workshops in the Telegram group or any of that stuff. But anyways, I always like to be as transparent as much as I can. And so when I had that experience today, I thought, kind of got a limp D. I was like, honestly, I just left early. I was like, okay, bye. Maybe I'll just listen to this as an audio when I'm walking or something, but it's not enough to warrant me sitting here. Okay, that was my rant. Anyway, back to the Sacred Femme Alchemy Podcast. But today, I really want to talk about this topic of knowing when you're ready to step into a relationship. And this just came to me as I was talking to a friend of mine, and he is starting to go back out there and date. And I love talking to a lot of my male friends. I have a lot of male friends. And I also coach different males. So I know I always tout women all the time, but if you are a male and you're interested in healing your family wounds to attract a healthy, loving, beautiful, next level relationship that is matching the type of energy and relationship that you want to level up in, feel free to DM me. Feel free to sign up for a one-on-one discovery call, and we can chat and see what one-on-one coaching looks like together for your specific experience and your desires and your goals of what you want to do. And so I always love working with men. I love working with women. And I just love this perspective because I guess in a way it helps me help all of the men who I used to date in some weird way, right? Because a lot of the men, even though they were emotionally unavailable, they were also great in other ways too, right? It's not like just because someone's emotionally unavailable, they're just the worst person ever. And I like to think about that. It's just more of the spiritual understanding that I do have when I work with people, when I do my own inner work. Trust me, I wasn't the nicest to people either when I was dating. And I'm pretty sure you've ghosted other people too. So you get mad at someone for ghosting you, but is this the first time that you've ghosted someone else, or have you never ghosted someone else? It's kind of like from the Bible when Jesus said, like when people wanted to throw stones at this woman, and I think she was cheating on her husband. And Jesus said, whoever hasn't sinned can throw the first stone. And no one could. So it's like, how do we give each other grace? How do we not take it personally when we're dating? And back to the topic of how do we know when we're ready to actually date? And so this is just my personal belief system of what is, and these are always coming from and stemming from my own experience. I told you, another person the other day asked me like, well, how did you become qualified? It's sure I got certified in training and everything, but a lot of it is just lived embodied experience that became wisdom of, and became doing a lot of things that I shouldn't have done. And so one, I think it's pretty obvious. if you're trying to date to get over someone, right? Or if you're trying to date someone to get out of a relationship. I think we all saw this in the very first breakup of J-Lo and Ben Affleck. It's so funny that I'm using pop culture. I guess I'm going there. Of when I think he was surrounded by strippers or something. And he didn't have the heart to break up with her. So she was just like, oh my God, you're making a fool out of me. You're embarrassing me. I cannot marry you. Wedding is off. Okay. And I've seen that before where some people will just act horrible. For example, oh my God, I can't believe I did not tell the story. So if you know me and you're close to me, you fucking know this story. But if you don't, okay. This is why it ended up going on my ideal list of who I wanted to attract and who I wanted to be with. So I remember when I was with my ex in New York, we just, we were having issues. And I remember his phone had a notification on it and I looked at it and it was someone from fucking Bumble. I was like, what the fuck? Like, why are you on the dating apps when you live with me? What? Right? And so it's this whole idea that encapsulates and, that experience of J-Lo and Ben Affleck, where it's, you don't want to be in a relationship, but you're too much of a coward to actually break up with a person. I think if anything, you should learn to communicate it, even though it's going to be really tough. Like, I actually admit that I did that with my high school relationship. I knew the relationship wasn't working out, and all of a sudden I developed a crush on someone else, and I kind of just went with that. But not realizing that I didn't have to pursue that crush. It was just more of an indication that I was no longer interested in the person that I was with anymore because I was with them for so long. And it's totally normal to find people attractive, but I think when you actually get into the position where you want to pursue it, because there's always a fine line, right? And for me, I would say I emotionally cheated. And I didn't have the balls to tell my then, boyfriend from high school, like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I just don't feel attracted to you that way anymore. And it was a coward's way out. Kind of thinking about it now, it's karma. Okay, Justin Timberlake, what goes around comes around. And so it's like knowing those things, that's when you're like, when you're trying to get into a relationship or you're trying to low-key pursue something that doesn't really have that much depth, or you just want some new casual fling, get out of the relationship first. And one, you probably shouldn't be looking for a romantic relationship because it's like a signal that maybe you should be alone and learn how to communicate, okay? I feel like this is going to be a very funny episode. And also, I remember too, sometimes what will people say? You need to get under a guy to get over a guy. Yeah, sometimes that works for people. I find that there's a common pattern that when you are in a relationship for a very long time, there's just this idea to go out there and physically experiment with so many people, right? So maybe you've been in a long-term relationship for over a year or 3+ years, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, what is it like to get back out there? What is it like to date? What is it like to have sex with different people? What are the norms? What do people do? All of this stuff. And you're just like very curious, and you're like, maybe you probably didn't have sex with your partner in a really long time because the relationship just wasn't going well. And you're like, oh my God, I'm like physically starved for affection and love. Then it's like knowing what you know in your body, like knowing your limits and knowing what you're okay with, knowing that you're walking into it as thinking, okay, this is specifically what I'm using this for, and being really intentional about it. I think everything comes down to being intentional about why you are having this entanglement, and looking at and making sure that the other person knows what your intentions are and you understand what their intentions are. Because the last thing you want to do is have your oxytocins really high and be like, oh my God, this is the person that I want to be with. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. Initially, I declared that I just wanted this to be casual, and now I'm in this situationship, right? And so I think it always comes down to always understanding and knowing what feels good for you in the relationship, what you're willing to walk away with, what you want. It's kind of like being conscious. It's honestly, this is the theme. It's just conscious dating. That's exactly what it is, of being really intentional and not having this whole attitude of, oh, well, I'm open to seeing if it goes somewhere serious. Because if you live your life without any sort of intention, you're not going anywhere. Not to say that you can't be open to delight. I think this whole idea of opening to delight and seeing where it goes or how it unfolds is knowing, hey, I have this intention of wanting to date seriously, then seeing if it actually works with you. That's what it means to be open delight in that sense. But if someone comes at you and you're like, okay, I want to have a serious relationship, but they don't, but they're open to seeing where it could be like 50-50. And you have to be okay with knowing that I walked into this, not blindly, but knowing that this 50% could not work and that I'm okay with understanding that maybe this person just wants to be casual and they want to see other people. You really have to check in with you. This isn't the time to compromise, right? You compromise when you're in a loving relationship. You don't compromise yourself before you're in a relationship with someone. This is where resentment starts to build up. And if you're already compromising yourself and your values and your needs and your wants and your desires, it's not a good foundation to be in a relationship with this person, right? Because you already know what you want and you're saying, oh, okay, well, then it's someone who half like low-key is unsure of wanting to be married, but then you know that's what you want. But then I'm sure they're going to probably gaslight you and say, oh, well, you'd break up with me if I treated you really well just because I don't want to marry you. But I mean, for some people, it's just okay. Like, people just think of it as a marriage certificate or like piece of paper, but it's okay if it's a piece of paper then, and it's not that important, then why can't you do it, right? I mean, obviously there's all those legal stuff that goes into it of like taxes and, divorce or whatever, but just knowing that for yourself, of always having a conversation ahead of time of what you want to get in intentionally out of the relationship, and is it aligned to what it is you want? So when you think about job hunting, like I always refer to job hunting because this is something that everyone has gone through, and it just makes it land so much for them, where you're job hunting. You have a certain idea of a salary that you want to hit because you have monthly expenses that you are incurred and you're responsible for paying for. Maybe you have financial goals of savings that you want to hit, so you need to increase your income. Maybe you don't want to have to work all the time and you want a boss that has a family that understands that you're not going to be working all the time. They understand that because they have family and kids, all of those things. And so you take all of those into consideration and you start to think and prioritize, okay, what is the most like non-negotiable thing that I have in negotiating this package if I get the job, right? So you start to address that and you start to prioritize what's number one, what's number two, what's number three, and then what's, oh, okay, I can live without that type of thing, right? And so if you can think about dating like that, if you can think about relationships like that, I know it's not reductive, it's just doing it, it's just making you help you see it in a framework that's very universally applicable to so many people. Because I know these concepts, they can be a little complicated sometimes, especially if you add like emotional layers to it or like psychology or any of that stuff. By the way, I'm not a psychologist, so this is just my experience. Okay, anyways. And so that's how you want to learn how to consciously date. And, obviously it's not perfect. I remember when my current partner left the States and went back to, his country, Denmark, I went back on the dating apps within 2 to 3 weeks, I think, just because I didn't want to feel the pain and that absence of him leaving. And it wasn't fair to other people that I was dating because I wasn't ready. So I want you to think about the emotional tornado that you're causing, because it's not just you when you date. Like, you're involving another person, you're involving another person's emotional, inner world into your world. And you are co-creating a relationship together. And so hopefully, it's so important to lead with that honesty, to really get real and raw about what it is that you want, the situation that you're in. Because at the end of the day, don't you want someone to give you honesty as well? And also, if someone can't meet you in the sense that they can't text you back, if they can't do things, like, you just have to know your boundaries for yourself. I know it's so hard, especially when we have these family wounds of, feeling like if we said something that it just won't ever be met. And so we just start to think that anytime we say something, it's not going to be met. So why even bother? Like, why even bother say something? And if I do say it and it gets rejected, I feel rejected, right? And so just know that the person who is telling you something that may not be in sync with what it is that you want isn't necessarily rejecting you. It's an opportunity to think about, how can I not take this personally, knowing that it's just a reflection of this person? And a lot of this stuff is like what it'll look like on the surface, but embodiment actually happens when you do the work and you feel the pain and you live through it. That's where it comes. That's where the self-esteem comes. The self-esteem comes from actually doing the work and feeling those feelings that you maybe shoved down that you don't want to experience, and actually doing it in a way where you feel proud of yourself. For, oh my God, I did something that was so scary, where I voiced my opinion. I said my needs of what it was that I wanted, and they weren't met. And so by doing that, you allow yourself to know that you have grit, you have resilience, you can withstand certain things, you're a badass. And that just becomes more data to you of, okay, this is why I'm like this. This is why I'm like that. This is why I love myself. And I'm so proud of myself for doing those things. And it's so interesting because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like you learn to magnetize and attract that partner when you become that partner. And so I highly encourage all of my clients, and this is something that you can do now, where you write down every single day about, okay, what is the type of person that you want to be with? And then instead of trying to look for that in other people, just be that yourselves. Like, honestly, that's like the quantum leaping fast track, like secret in order to find someone. Because once you start to fall in love with your life, where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm no longer in a position where I feel like there's just this gap in my life where I feel lonely or I feel stupid if I don't have a companion or if I don't have anybody to spend time with. You would be surprised. There are a lot of people out there that are just looking for people to date because they just want a companion. So if you want a companion, go get a dog or a cat. Go get a pet. You know, like relationships aren't just about companionship. They're about emotional growth. They're about sometimes challenging you. And I hope that you want a relationship that actually makes you want to be a better person, right? That maybe calls you on your shit. And sometimes people don't, right? And that's totally fine. That's just the type of relationship I'm calling in, where it's this level of relationship where together we are so much more powerful rather than individually, because we are learning to help each other grow and become the people that we are meant to be in this world, to serve thousands, multiple people, millions of people, have such an impact just with our presence alone of creating this healthy family dynamic where we bring children in that also create change in the world. Like, that's the type of relationship I'm talking about. Not everybody wants that, right? People just want someone to go to the movies with. People just, want someone to have a child with because that's what they think you do. But I really encourage you to think, okay, society has given me this narrative of what I think I need to be or what I want to have in my life. And so how can you think about, why do I want those things in your life? And so I think even before you even date, you need to understand that question and have an answer to, why is it that I want to date? It can't just be, okay, I have a good job, I have this, I have that. This is the last piece that's missing, right? It has to be more than that. Because if this is someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with, there best be a good reason, right? So I leave you with that. This was a little all over the place, but I'm having fun with it. Hope you're enjoying these, every other day type of podcast episodes, but I hope you have a beautiful weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow. Sat Nam.